Welcome to Energy Stew. This is Peter Roth, your host, and I'd like to ask you, how well versed are you in Vedic astrology? Aren't all of us well versed in Vedic astrology? And I don't think so. So, to help us move more in that direction is a man who I am so impressed with his Vedic knowledge, experience, background, and love for this path. And has a book called Astrology Decoded, The Secret Science of India's Sages. And I know I'm speaking with a sage right now. Vish Chatterji, welcome to Energy Stew.
Thank you, Peter. I'm honored to be in your presence and on this show. And I'm honored that the audience is tuning in and listening to this discussion. We'll see where it goes, but Vedic astrology usually opens up some kind of a wormhole. So get ready to dive into something completely different today.
And I've listened to a lot of your interviews, and I see the vastness of subject matter that you can cover.
Mm.
And I think it's just the depth of Indian wisdom and the background that you come from. And it's thousands of years old. It's it's the rishis at work, right?
Yeah, we believe that the Vedic astrology system started some 8,000 years ago, sometime after the Ice Age. And what we understand, and there's lots of debate and scholars going back and forth trying to date it. And because India was conquered by foreign forces, we were told our systems were junk and to adopt these more colonial Western systems. But as India sort of found its own independence, find its own way, a lot of Indian scholars are starting to realize that our systems date back, to ancient times. And we believe that after the ice ages, these rishis roamed those areas in the Himalayas. And the rishis were these, highly evolved human beings, highly, highly evolved. I mean, it's, beyond intelligence, they had a spiritual intelligence, but also an ability to cognize knowledge. So in a way, in deep states of meditation, they would have these downloads of information from who knows where. You might be able to even explain it, but they were getting these insights, and that developed a knowledge system called the Vedic knowledge system. And that's the system from which yoga derives. So many of you who practice yoga, it's coming from the Vedic knowledge system. Ayurveda, if you've ever seen an Ayurvedic medicine doctor, that's a mind-body medicine system in ancient India. And then, of course, they were observing the stars. And these rishis would observe the stars, they'd observe the movements of these planets and star constellations, and they would notice the effect it was having on human life. And they were able to correlate a human-based event with a celestial event. And so they're able to then see that, hey, when these planets move in these positions, when these particular star constellations are active, these are the things that happen in people's lives. And so then develop the system of Jyotisha. Jyotisha. Jyotir means light. Isha means God, the divine. So Jyotish is the study of the divine light of the universe. We reduce it to this very boring term, Vedic astrology, because people understand, oh yeah, astrology, it's to do with the stars. Vedic, oh okay, it's Indian, but the real word is Jyotish, the light of consciousness.
And
So
that's
what we're doing is
Jyotish.
yes, yeah, Jyotis. So of course in English you'd say Joe as in the man, J-O, Joe, and then T-I-S-H. Jyotish would be the transliterated version, but yeah, it's spelled Jyotisha, Jyotisha.
Right. And so you became a student of this, previously being an engineer, or maybe you still are partly an engineer. And I've heard you say in other interviews that many Vedic astrologers were engineers first.
Yeah, I mean, I started out as an engineer, then I was a business executive. I worked in the corporate world for a long time. I had about 20 years in the executive ranks in the corporate world. And it turns out in India that people that go into astrology have a pretty solid intellectual educational background. They've studied either science or medicine or engineering or these, very technical fields. And it turns out Vedic astrology needs a lot of technical computational ability. You have to really understand, all these technical pieces of the system. But the other thing is also the engineer is at the core a problem solver, trying to solve a problem. And usually when somebody comes to an astrologer, especially a Vedic astrologer, they're looking to solve a problem. That, hey, Vish, I have this problem, I have this challenge in my life. I want to fix it, I want to improve it. And this may be one of the differences. Western astrology is sort of this, what is your psychology? Who are you? What are your traits? Whereas Vedic astrology is who are you at the soul level and where are you out of balance? And then how do we fix that? How do we rectify that? So this problem solving and root causing becomes very important.
From
Somebody
the
comes to me and
source,
says, yeah,
from the source, rather than what's on the surface that people are confused about, because that's the mind playing tricks on us and imagination and all that kind of stuff that comes from conditioning, and that can be very superficial.
that's right. And there's almost this, in the yoga system, because the thing about Vedic astrology, it integrates with the yoga system, it integrates with the Ayurvedic medicine system, integrates with Vedic knowledge, the Vedanta system, all these sort of Indian spiritual traditions, they all integrate together. And so when we think about Vedic astrology, we have to understand in a yogic point of view, there's different layers of our being. There's a physical body, there's an emotional mind and mental body, there's an energetic body, but there's also a soul level. So these different layers of our being. And when we're born, ideally, we want to live in a soul aligned way to
Sounds
do the work
sounds
of our
right.
soul, right? We're here to do the work of our soul. But our mind is so strong. Our psychology and mind and ego is so strong. We can literally pull ourselves away from the sole purpose. We can pull ourselves into a completely fabricated identity. And that fabricated identity is often called the ego. The ego is in control. So when I live my life with ego control, I can go a 90-degree angle from what my soul is trying to do. My soul's trying to go left and I can force it to go right because the ego is so strong,
But let
right?
me say that I believe in divine order. So I don't think the ego doing its thing is a mistake. I think it's here for the lessons that we have to learn. And it gets
Mm-hmm.
in our way only because we need the lessons that the distortion that the ego is creating.
Well, the lessons often come in the form of misery.
Yes, but that's why Buddha said that life is suffering.
Yeah. So when the ego is in control, then we pull away and then we learn our lessons, but it comes through a lot of misery and suffering and unhappiness. And so when we start to align back to the soul, we start to find more happiness. We start to find more less misery, right? And so people that practice yoga, and I mean the real yoga, not just gymnastics on a mat, but the full yogic system, when they do it, in the eight limbs of yoga, we have yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyan, samadhi, the full system
And that's from the Yoga Sutras, right?
from the Yoga Sutras. Yeah, when you practice a full system, you are realigning the soul. And so you start to realign the soul and you start to have more happiness. And so even if you show up at a yoga studio and do a little bit twisting on a mat, you do feel happier because you're activating one eighth of that path towards
Wow.
happiness.
Wow.
So then what happens is the Vedic astrologer, when they look at a map of the sky at the moment you were born, they're trying to interpret what is your soul really trying to do and how far did you deviate? How far away did you go? And so when somebody says, look, I'm having this challenge in life, you start to realize, oh, this is because you're misaligned in that area. And what's been fascinating is people, come to me who've been through Western astrology, and Western astrology is to understand the ego. So when you go to a Western astrologer, they're going to help you understand your psychology, your mind, your ego. But that's the thing that's been moving you away from soul the whole time. So if we correct back to soul, it's going to be a little bit bumpy when you come to Vedic astrology. You're going to be like, oh my God, I'm getting readjusted. Now I'm trying to align to my soul. But eventually you move towards, rather than the misery of the ego, you start to move to the beauty and bliss of the soul.
But those people don't have the knowledge of Vedic astrology to know really what their soul is here for.
Right. And what's been interesting for me is to realize the math difference, right? So when you look at a Western astrology chart, its math is not consistent or aligned with the actual sky.
Right,
And
it changed over time.
it changed over time and is drifted, right? But when you look at Vedic astrology, it is accurate to the sky. So then you start to realize, oh, I'm trying to realign to the accurate sky. I'm trying to realign to my accurate soul.
Right. But there's also a language to Vedic astrology that is more comfortable to realize. You know, it gets to the point.
Mm, depends, right? The the whole point of Vedic astrology is to get to the truth,
Exactly.
get to the point, get to the truth.
Yeah.
And some people aren't comfortable with the truth, right? It's too much.
And those
So
people won't seek you out
they won't. Yeah, they're kind of happy and resting in their sort of ego driven existence, right?
in their
And
struggle.
until something breaks, right? Until something really breaks,
Right.
they're sort of comfortable. So there's like a place for all the astrology systems, is what I'm starting to realize, that there's a place for all of it. It just depends where you are in your journey and what you want to accomplish. If you really want to know the truth of who you are and you want to know the root of what is causing misery or suffering in your life, then Vedic astrology helps map that out in a very accurate, detailed way.
Right.
If you are interested in, okay, well, what's my mind thinking? What's my psychology? How do I sort of interpret the world? What are my personality traits? And Western astrology has a great coverage of that. But if it discovers that something's off in Western astrology, there's no remedy. This is your chart. That's it. But the Vedic astrology, there's a lot of agency involved. You can do something about it. So if you have a difficult planet, you can actually take actions in your life. You can, employ these spiritual tools and lifestyle changes to attenuate that energy and shift it to be more aligned and more balanced.
Right. Using
Right.
yogic tools.
Sometimes they're just sometimes very simple tools. Like sometimes yogic tools are the most sophisticated, right? If you take a yogic tool, it's the most sophisticated. But if somebody doesn't want to take that kind of a deep spiritual approach, simple stuff like somebody has a challenge with money in their life or love in their life. Money and love are connected to the planet Venus, and Venus's energy is attenuated with music. So start playing music, start singing, start dancing. Little by little, you're attenuating Venus energy. Or worship a goddess. Venus is connected to feminine divine. Worship the form of the divine feminine, whatever that is in your culture, tradition, doesn't matter. You start worshiping the divine feminine, or you start volunteering to help women in need. You're adjusting and attenuating Venus's energy in your life, and therefore the love energy or the money energy would improve in your life.
And also, it's about understanding the nature of life being energy.
Yeah, as an astrologer, you look at everything in terms of energy, and most of us are somewhat conscious of it. So, for instance, you live in New York City. I was there not long ago. If you go to, let's say, a music like the orchestra, or you go to the opera, you'll see there are patrons of the arts. There's all these wealthy people donating money to the arts. Do they know why they're doing it? They probably don't. But there's some consciousness in them that says, hey, I have a lot of money. I should donate to the arts. Astrologically, what's happening is you are activating Venus energy, which activates wealth. So by donating to the arts, you've activated Venus, which in turn is going to come back to you in abundance and Venus money energy.
And there's
So it's
also
sort of hidden
harmony,
away, but it's known, right?
and there's harmony in music.
And there's harmony in music, exactly right. So little by little you start to learn as like for instance, I have very challenging Mars in my chart, and Mars is warriors. Mars is a warrior planet. So I volunteer to work with soldiers. I work with combat veterans. I help them deal with their PTSD. I teach meditation, do some coaching. I donate to projects that help hurt warriors who've been wounded. As I do that, I'm attenuating Mars in my chart and improving the Mars energy, which then
Wow,
allows me to execute and be a better leader.
I love that.
Right.
And we were talking before the show about my chart, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I had many shows about the source cards, and that I'm a four of clubs, and that means the mind four squaring everything. And then it turns out that I'm a Virgo with Mercury, which is all about doing that, right?
Yeah. So what you're saying is basically when you were born, at the exact moment of your birth, if you were standing in front of the hospital and look to the eastern horizon, you would actually see the stars of Virgo, right? And so rather than being a sign, it's a constellation. It's in Sanskrit, we called it a rashi. Rashi means a heap of energy. That means the energy that is in the heap of stars of Virgo was casting its energy on you, and you were interacting with that energy as you took life in this particular incarnation.
It worked.
Right? And so Virgo
Perfectly.
is a sign of service. So you'll be wanting to serve humanity.
And here I am talking with you, which I think is serving humanity.
Yeah, all of your work is in service to others, right? And
Yeah.
so Virgo can be very humble also because they're always in service to others.
Uh-huh.
And Virgo, every sign, every constellation has a planet that rules it, meaning the planets are sort of the key energy, and the planet is expressing itself through those stars of Virgo. And the planet behind Virgo is Mercury.
Mhm.
Mercury is the main planet, and Mercury happens to be the color green. So you'll favor green. I think you're wearing a green shirt.
Yes.
You got green
It's
on your
green.
background.
Yes.
You'll be drawn to green because green is the color of Mercury, the planet that rules Virgo. And Mercury governs information,
Right.
lots of information. So you'll be somebody who's really interested in information, lots
That's
of
why
information.
that's why we're talking.
Yeah. I want information. I want to know. I want the knowledge. I want to intellectualize it. Right. But in your chart, Mercury was retrograde when you were born.
Hmm.
So what that means is the planets all rotate around the Earth. Oh, sorry. The planets all rotate around the sun, right? Every planet, including the Earth, rotates around the sun. But from Earth perspective, at some points in their orbit, they appear to be going backwards.
Uh-huh.
So even though Mercury is going the same direction around the sun, from Earth's perspective, it looks like it's going backwards. And we call that a retrograde
But
energy,
what has that done to me?
right? And of course, people say, oh, Mercury retrograde, challenges with technology, challenges with communication. But the word retrograde in Sanskrit, the word that we use is called vakra, vakra. And the word for Mercury is bud, like Buddha, right? So the fact that you have Mercury as a ruler chart is bud. You'll have some interest in Buddha and Buddhist tradition,
Hmm.
which you shared with me. You've had a lot of interactions and past life experiences with Buddhist tradition. That's
Right.
bud.
Right.
Vakra means the other way, not straightforward, but the other way. And the other way means the more spiritualized path. So what happens is for a non-spiritual person, Mercury retrograde makes garbled communications and challenges with technology. But for a spiritual person, Vakra means they can communicate things that are beyond the material plane. They can
I love
communicate
that.
beyond. So Mercury retrograde becomes a Vakra Buddh. And Buddh is also the word for intelligence in Sanskrit, Buddhi. You can have in a simple way, a, an intelligence that is not directly forward, but intelligence that goes beyond and behind things.
And this is why I've taught a spiritual mystery school for 28 years.
Exactly right. So then we get to something very interesting. Your Mercury, which is the lord of your chart and the ascendant of the chart, the exact ascending moment, is within Virgo. But in India, we also use these 27 stars that are within the constellations. So even though you have Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, and so forth, within them, there's specific stars that we call nakshatras. And the nakshatras are almost, I've actually heard them described as light beings. So,
Mhm.
and I think your
Love
audience is
that.
open to that concept that these are sort of mythological light beings. And myth is not the right word. They're sort of active beings that things are happening through. And so the mythology of these particular nakshatra stars gives us a deeper look into somebody's karma. And your nakshatra, the star within Virgo that you're born in, is called Hasta, 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 out of these 27 stars that we use in India. And it happens to be number 13 of 27. And of course, everyone knows what does the number 13 mean? There's all this garbled, misunderstood, oh, 13 is bad luck, blah, blah, blah. But 13 actually is the mystical number. It's the things that are hidden from mainstream society. It's the alternative, occult, unexplained, supernatural, behind the scenes number. That's why people got scared and called it a bad luck number and stopped building the 13th floor. In New York, you go building, there's no 13th floor because they're afraid of it, but it was actually the number of the hidden things, the occult.
Mm.
So then you'll be very drawn to the unexplained, the hidden, the
That's
secrets.
why my school is a mystery school.
Mr. School, exactly. And then Hasta's symbol is the palm. And as many of your listeners know, the palm symbolizes knowing somebody's future, knowing somebody's fate. In India, palmistry is used to understand. You can read a birth chart, you can read a face, you can read a palm, you can read energy. There's different ways to understand people. So Hasta relates to that. So typically, people born with that number 13 nakshatra, which changes every single day, they will be drawn to the hidden secrets, the hidden mysteries, and especially telling and understanding people's deeper soul journey, which is your life work, it feels like.
Yeah. And in the I Ching, the 61st hexagram is all about the mysteries. And
Mm,
I attract a lot of people who have that in their life, who are attracted to the mysteries.
yeah.
And who knows? I mean, there are other signs, other, uh, what I don't remember the word you call them of the 27,
The
but
nakshatras,
there's
yeah.
so many other of those in everybody's chart that here and there you don't have to have hasta to do what I'm doing.
Yeah, I mean, out of the 27, though, Hasta is the most mystery interested.
But in Virgo, that is. But there are other.
Yeah, but then every, the nakshatras all have different connotations, meanings.
Yeah.
Your moon, for instance, when you're born, was in a nakshatra called Shravana. And Shravana is symbolized by the ear.
Uh-huh.
It's the listener. So you'll have a mind to listen to things and listening to things that are between the words, beyond the words.
Well, that's how intuition works.
Exactly. So people with moon and Shravana have very powerful intuition. They hear things, they see things beyond the words.
I love this. This is wonderful. We only have several minutes left, and you and I were talking about the planet and civilization right now, and where it's at, and where it's going. And since Vedic astrology can also look ahead, there are ways that you feel optimistic about our future, right?
Yeah, I mean, everything is a karmic cycle. At the end of the day, everything is part of karma. That's how Vedic astrology sees the world. And so even us, when we go through difficult times, it's part of our soul's evolution. So you could say we all are born and living in a time now where we all have this very difficult purification to go through.
Right.
We have an evolution to go through. And Vedic astrologer needs a birth chart to do anything. Like typically, you need, when is something born? So I pulled a birth chart for the U.S. I said, okay, when was the U.S. born? And I figured someday on the 4th of July in 1776 in
Right.
Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, this nation was born.
Right.
And when it was born, and I figured, towards the evening, right? In the evening when the last signature was on the document, it was ratified. So, and people have rectified that time and come up with a time that works
Hmm.
based on all the events of the US, right? And so on that chart, you can see that there was a tremendous amount of difficulty we went through about 3 to 4 years ago, which was the middle of the pandemic. So you can see that was sort of a reckoning. And we're still just coming out of that mess.
Mhm.
But what's happening now is we have a whole bunch of planets. Like I think it's five, one, two, three. Yeah, five different planets all going through the fourth house of the US chart. So, and if anyone looks in the sky, they're going to see there's a bunch of planets all in the same place. And there's a lot of talk about that. But where they are in a birth chart makes a difference. And the US chart, they're on the fourth house, and that is house of psychology. So the mind and psychology of the American people right now is just completely chaotic and all over the place because there's five different energies all competing, all these different planets. And some of them are shadow planets that create problems. Some of them are, there's Rahu, which is a North Node planet. There's the Mercury, there's Sun, there's Saturn, there's Venus. There's all these planets. So there's competing sort of psychological understanding of ourselves at the moment. And so I think most people in the US now, it doesn't matter where you are on the political spectrum, there is a psychological confusion overall. And again, it's something we all have to go through. And so when there's psychological disturbance in an individual, what do? You learn to meditate, right? Nowadays the psychologists are trying to figure it out, but they're like, oh, when we prescribe somebody who's a little crazy meditation, they seem to settle, they seem to get balanced. We are in a crazy time. What do we need to do? We need to meditate more.
Right. Wait it
Realize that we're
out.
beyond that, right? What's that?
Wait it out.
Yeah, wait it
Meditation
out,
is
but
the
also
way of pausing.
yeah, but also understand that we are beyond the craziness. Whatever's happening in our world around us, we are as individual souls are beyond that. And we
Sure.
forget that. So we fall into it like, oh my God, what happened to my 401k? What happened to my retirement account? What happened to,
Yeah.
so and so? And then you realize, wait a minute, I'm beyond that. I'm not my 401k. I'm not my investments. I'm not my job. I'm not my name. I'm beyond it all. Right. And in personal inquiry and a lot of meditation practices, you realize you're beyond all that.
Right.
So what an amazing time for us to remember that fundamental spiritual lesson that we are beyond all this.
Right. And only some people can understand that and see that in themselves and relax about the process and know that we're just going through a tough time.
Yeah, and it will pass. It's not a forever.
Exactly.
Right? It will pass because these five planets are all like right in our house of psychology. As time goes on, they start to shift away, and their energy spreads out in other parts, and then all of a sudden we're like, "Wow, that's over." Think of all the difficult times you've had in your life. At some point, it passed,
Right.
and you learned from it.
So I'm so excited that we can talk about all of this because I love learning about Vedic, not just Vedic astrology, but the whole world behind it. And you represent that. You're really somebody who's seeking the deeper knowing of everything. And
Thank
so I really love talking with you. And I'm just thinking of other topics we can do another time.
you. Yes, so many. Yeah, so many topics.
Yeah.
There's an intro, but
So,
you know,
yeah.
the Vedic astrology for me has been a much more sort of intelligent way to view the world. And I'm
Yes.
I'm I'm a student of it. I'm learning as I go. I'm learning the new system that came to me, and it's activated in me. And as I start to see it, I see, wow, the whole world has this very elegant and sophisticated way of operating. And you start to learn through Vedic astrology the mechanism of the universe. And
Maybe one of your previous lifetimes you were one of those rishis some long time ago.
yeah, could be at a
Could be.
minimum. I was an astrologer at some point because
Uh-huh.
astrology, Vedic astrology, you don't you come into it over multiple lifetimes. It takes a few lifetimes to get to any beginner level competency. Even takes a few lifetimes.
I
Right.
understand
So
that.
if if one of your listeners picks up my book Astrology Decoded and starts reading it and they get it and they're like, oh, this makes sense. They've done it in a previous lifetime. It's not the first time around. My book is just reminding them
I,
of the knowledge they used to
I
have.
love that. So the book is Astrology Decoded, and you are Vish Chatterji. And how can people find you? You have a website, a Vish Chatterji website.
Yes, actually, I named it vishchatterji.com. So
Okay.
it's easy enough.
Not
You can
tricky.
find me there at vishchatterji.com. You can find a link to buy the book. The book's on anywhere books are sold, anywhere worldwide it's available. And then from there, you can learn about me. And if you need to reach out to me, the website's got a way to get a hold of me.
I love that. Vish, thank you so much for being on Energy Stew and talking with me.
So fun, Peter. Thank you for having me. I feel so charged and lightened after this conversation.
I, Me too. Thank you. And
Great.
this is Peter Roth, your host of Energy Stew at prn.live. I can be reached at Peter at Heart River, HEART River.org. I'd love to hear from you, and thanks so much for listening.